Hello, namaste, and welcome to this second talk on the oldest book of classical Kabbalah, the Bahir, the Book of Clarity. Since it is my intention to present these particular talks as a running commentary on the Bahir, and there is so much to say, I cannot every time recuperate everything I've talked about in the last talk. So let me just say a few words about the previous talk to give a bit of a background, and then I'll just have to refer the listener to the previous videos, the other videos, if more info is required. So in the first video about the Bahir, I only explained the structure of the Hebrew word Bahir itself. So the word that means clarity, and that features in the Bahir's first short chapter, the first Mishnah of the Bahir. So in the first talk, I showed how the word Bahir itself lays down a philosophical, theosophical, metaphysical foundation. So the word states that creation, although flowing forth from oneness, is dual in essence, and the subject of this duality is identified as being feminine and closely related to the third Sphira Bina, the mother, and the last Sphira Malchut, the daughter, which is the 10th Sphira. So the morphology of the word Bahir next shows how the spiritual reunion of these two feminine aspects, each with numerical value 5, transcends the mystic beyond duality to the region where all is balance. So the final letter of the word Bahir enlightens us to the fact that this transcendence also implies a return. In Kabbalistic parlance, this is the return to the womb of the mother. So now let me read the first short chapter again to refresh our memory, and then I'll continue with interpretation of this Mishnah. So the first short chapter reads, Rabbi Nechunya ben Hakana said, one verse, Job 37:21 says, and now they do not see light, which is bright in the heavens. And another verse says, Psalm 18:12, he makes darkness his hiding place. It is also written, Psalm 97:2, clouds and mists surround him. And here we have an apparent contradiction, but a third verse comes and harmonizes them. And this is Psalm 139:12. Also darkness is to you not dark, night shines like day, and darkness is as light. So as I said, the word Bahir itself teaches us that 2 of the 10 emanations or attributes are particularly important when discussing creation. These are Bina, the 3rd Sphira, and Malchut, the 10th Sphira. So as said as well, these 2 Sephirot are in the name of names, the Tetragrammaton, represented by 2 hays that are part of this name that forms the boundaries of creation according to Kabbalistic thought. So now other Sephirot are already implied in this at this stage of the Bahir as well. So let me just mention them before we continue. I alluded through my interpretation of the 9th Sphira Yesod, which is foundation, to that aspect as well, foundation. So that's the 9th Sphira Yesod that is implied. And another of particular importance at this point is the Sphira Gebura, the 5th Sphira Gebura, strength, which also has other names, Pachat, fear, and Din, judgment. So at this stage of the Bahir, really early stage, we're looking mostly at the 3rd Sphira Bina, the mother, the 10th Sphira Malchut, the daughter, the 9th Sphira Yesod, foundation, the foundation of all things, and the 5th Sphira Gebura, strength. Now, as the 5th Gebura, the last one I mentioned, plays an integral role in the secrets pertaining to Bina and Malchut, the 3rd and the 10th. The latter 2 are intimately connected to the 2 letters He, with the numerical value 5 of the Tetragrammaton, whereas the former, Gebura, itself is the 5th Sphira, so the 5 features in all 3 of these Sephirot. Now, when the time is right for this, the Bahir will initiate deeper acquaintance with this, with a specific task that the 5th Sphira has in the transformation of the one into duality, which is a massive subject, of that which is whole into that which is divided. But for now, what is of interest is that the numerical value of the word Gebura is 216, and that, as the medium between Malchut and Bina, it harmonizes the fundamental opposition between these 2 Sephirot. So as such, from the human perspective, Gebura paves the way to the primordial non-duality that Bina is so close to. And when we come to realize this pathway, a realization that in its naked truth can only be non-rational, we find that this has a profound effect on ourselves. So in other ways, we internalize the pathway and as such become more empty. Now, this emptiness is the vessel for the powers of the One. So numerically, this experience can be reflected by the numbers 216, the starting point or our starting point, the fifth Sphira Gebura, and the One, which is the first godly emanation as represented by the first Sphira Keter, the crown. So the sum of these two numbers, 200 is 217, 216 plus 1, and the 217 is significant because it equals the numerical value of the word Bahir. So as such, we see that the Bahir itself, apart from the letters that I discussed in the first talk, also is significant because of its numerical value linked to Gebura, the fifth Sphira, and Keter, the first. Now, whereas the translation of the word Bahir is clarity, its implication, both physically and psychologically, is the presence of light. So as I see it, divinely inspired Bahir attempts to clarify, if not impart, this same godly light. So it hopes to bring us to the place of God, which in Hebrew is Makom El, words that have the same numerical value, 217, just like the Bahir. So that this godly place is, of course, a place of unity, which in the worldview of the Bahir means the unity of all the 10 Sephirot, together called the Tree of Life. Now the phrase, the light of the 10, implied Sephirot, or the light of the Yud, also has the numerical value 217. Now when seen from a godly or enlightened perspective, the clarification of these matters that the Bahir wants to impart pertains to my light, as in God is speaking my light, the light of God. So in Hebrew, these words translate to the same word Ori, which also has the numerical value 217. So we see already that that the order of the letters is important, as is shown by the word Bahir, that the number of those letters is important, but also that the total numerical value of the chosen title of the book Bahir is very important. So now the word for light itself, as we saw, the word Or appears in the same first verse as quoted by the Bahir, as the one in which the word Bahir features. So that's Job 37:21. In Job 37:21, the word Or is preceded by the word for they saw, translated into the present tense in English, which is Ra'u. And both these words are made up of the same letters, a fact pointing at one of the techniques, or another one of the techniques utilized by the author of the Bahir to bestow a meaning. So not just numbers of letters, or meanings of letters, or numerical value of a total word, but also the order of those letters, even though the numerical value of the word itself remains the same. Now we can understand that this double use of the same letters as an additional reference to the topic of duality that has a unified essence. So now, although the words Or and Ra'u carry different meanings, they contain the same letters and hence, Kabbalistically, share the same numerical value. So, Kabbalistically speaking, these words are seen as sharing the same essence, sharing the same soul in Kabbalistic parlance as well. Now, the use of words that contain the same letters in different orders as to express further meaning is already employed by Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, the book of formation, together with the Bahir considered the oldest books of classical Kabbalah. Now in this, the book of creation, chapter 2, section 4, for example, the words for delight, oneg, and plague, nega, are mentioned side by side. Now, written with the same letters, they form the topic of a discourse about the magical rotation of Hebrew letters and the effect that this has in the material world. So it is said from the quotations used by the author of the Bahir that he was familiar, it is clear from the quotations that he was familiar with Sefer Yetzirah. So the belief in the divine powers of the Hebrew letters, a belief that of course is but a small step from magical practices involving those letters, however, is much older than these two books, of course. Now the next quote that the Bahir offers, Psalm 18:12 and Psalm 97:2, contradict Job 37:21, which we saw was the first quote used. Whereas in Job 37:21, God is likened to the bright light, Bahir, The other two say that God's presence is characterized by darkness. Now, after pointing this problem out, the Bahir proposes another verse, Psalm 139:12, that decides between, harmonizes the contradiction between these two. Now, the verb used to express this deciding, this harmonizing capacity, is lachria. It's similarly employed by Sefer Yetzirah, but the Bahir uses some of its additional meanings, which are to kneel and to bow. So thus the harmonizing quality of the verb used is likened to a mental and spiritual lowering down of oneself. This attitude of humility is understood as paving the way for deeper understanding. Now, the practice of spiritual humility through different ways of physical and psychological self-effacement as a means to the direct experience of reality of God was known to many Kabbalists from various streams of Jewish mysticism. We can find discussions on this topic in the writings of the prophetic practical Kabbalist Abraham Abulafia, 13th century, who was of the opinion that a human has to mystically die to arrive at true life. Now, phrased differently, but reflecting the similar understanding, the founder of 18th century Hasidism, the Baal Shem Tov, stated that man has to be as if dead to come to spiritual perfection. So the Bahir uses these ideas together with the harmonizing factor. So it's not just harmonizing between two words that seem to be having the opposite meaning, but it's also used as harmonizing oneself with God. And this is, in the Kabbalistic worldview, done by becoming nothing, as in by seeing oneself or understanding that one himself, herself, is nothing in the literal sense of the word. Now, the opening section, the opening Mishnah of the Bahir, thus presents us with the suggestion of God's light, an opposing proposition about God's darkness, and a harmonizing statement about God's quality to unite opposites. Now, this idea of a metaphysical trinity of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis was taken up by the Zohar, the Book of Splendor, 13th, 14th centuries, in which, accordingly, the first 9 Sephirot are divided into trinities. As a result, the Zohar ascribes a special status to the number 9, 3 times 3, and all that pertains to this number. The uniqueness of the number 9 is apparent from the fact that the 9th letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Tet, is the only letter that is not used in the 10 Commandments. All the other letters of the Hebrew alphabet do feature there. And the 18th century Sabbatian prophet Jacob Frank emphasized this extraordinary sphere constituted by the 9, and he called it the fullness of the 9, which is a phrase the Bahir will come back to extensively. I think this is enough for now. The next talk I will go deeper into the next subjects that are offered by this Mishnah. I hope this was interesting, and thank you for listening, and until the next time. Namaste. Bye.